Ever since Devil May Cry invented the concept of badass swordsmen, video games that came out after it and before it have been trying to replicate its style, and Fire Emblem is no exception. Myrmidons and Swordsmasters are probably one of the most popular classes to use in the fandom, with their emphasis on cool swordplay and critical hits always unleashing a bit of serotonin in a player's mind. The green sparkles of Astra, the cut-ins in Fates and Awakening, the afterimages in the GBA games. Watching Swordsmasters do their thing is undoubtedly one of the most fun things to watch when you're playing a Fire Emblem game. But how good has the class been throughout the series' history? Has it always been efficient to use these incredible killing machines? Or have they floundered in some places? Well, today, I'm going to look at Swordsmasters and Myrmidons from the start of the series to now, and see how the class has evolved throughout Fire Emblem's 30 years as a franchise. Since this is the third episode of this retrospective series, it's probably time to lay down some ground rules for what I'll be talking about. The first part is I will be talking about the class in a general sense. No specific units, just what the class does, any unique quirks and skills that it has, and how it functions for players and enemies. And as for the units I'm talking about, I'm only going to be talking about a unit if they are naturally a part of the class I'm talking about. To give an example for this video, I will not be talking about Tsubaki from Fire Emblem Fates, because while he can reclass into a samurai and swordsmaster, he very clearly belongs in a video talking about Pegasus Knights. And also, I'm going to be talking about how good they are if you leave them in the class I'm talking about. Otherwise, once reclassing gets introduced, every single character's analysis would end with, "But they could be a Wyvern Lord, though." And that's just not fun to talk about. With that explanation out of the way, I would like to ask before the video begins to please like the video and comment, and also remember to subscribe to the channel, or else I will break into your house, pull out a sword, swing it a few times at nothing, and then when you're confused, I'm gonna sheath it, and then you're gonna fucking die.
There is no meme. This is just a threat.
Alright, time for the very first Fire Emblem game. This footage you're looking at right now is the gameplay of Myrmidons and Swordsmasters in Fire Emblem 1. Oh right, there are no Myrmidons and Swordsmasters in Fire Emblem 1. You might have a giant Navarre-shaped question mark in your brain right now, but it's true. There are no Myrmidons in Fire Emblem 1. The class just doesn't exist yet. Units that we know as Myrmidons are actually just mercenaries. Just sword infantries that promote into hero. Navarre and Rad, who would later be Myrmidons and Swordsmasters, are just mercenaries like Agma and Samson. The only thing worth bringing up is the fact that there's no distinction yet is a sign for things to come. Mercenaries and heroes, and Myrmidons and Swordsmasters, are two class sets that have a very strange history with each other, where they're constantly intertwined, and then separate, and then intertwined again, and it just is going to make a lot of this really confusing. But for right now, there are no Myrms, so we can easily just move on. Moving on to Fire Emblem Gaiden, we have our first case of semantics in this video, as the sword fighting class has 3 tiers. It starts with Mercenary, promotes to Myrmidon, and then becomes Dreadfighter at its highest level of power. So, does it belong in this video, or in a video about mercenaries? I'm gonna say this video, because when you think about Swordsmasters, their blinding speed is one of their trademarks, and Dreadfighters are the fastest class in the game. So I'm going to say that yes, this will be the traditional debut of a Myrmidon class line. And honestly, what a debut it is. Dreadfighters are the most powerful endgame class, sporting incredible speed, nigh untouchable resistance, and just incredible movement in combat. And due to how promotion in Fire Emblem Gaiden works, the stats of your dudes almost don't matter. They're set to the class's bases whenever they promote, and since Dreadfighter's bases are so good, they'll be good at pretty much every level. This is a great first showing for for what it means to be really fast swish swooshing with a sword. But of course, how good are the potential sword fighters you get? The first one you recruit is Saber, and he is your only physical unit for a little bit on Celica's campaign. Now, his growth rates are mostly bad, as is the Times of Gaiden, but he has oddly good HP and defense growth, which actually helps more than you would think. Because, as I said, when you promote, you get set to the class's bases, so while Saber's strength and speed won't grow naturally, he'll always be set to enough to do a lot of damage, and his HP and defense will actually make him incredibly bulky. Once he gets the resistance boost for being a dread fighter, he'll be almost unkillable on the front lines, dodging everything, and the things he doesn't dodge barely do anything to him. He's a solid frontline fighter from the moment you get him to the credits of the game. Just a great unit, and it makes me wish alcoholics were real.
Money can't buy you happiness, believers, when I show them gambling and alcohol.
Kamui is the second potential Myrmidon and Dread fighter you get, and he is a bit more offensive focused than Saber, so his damage will end up higher, and he's gonna end up a little frailer. Fire Emblem Gaiden doesn't have a deployment limit, so you lose nothing by having 2 Dread fighters, and honestly, you'd want 2 Dread fighters anyway. He can swoosh on into almost any combat scenario, deal good damage, and then get out of dodge just as fine. He's another solid unit, and he'll probably grow to do a decent amount of damage and maybe kill some things that Saber can't, albeit not too much. Just a really good unit who, honestly, has no reason to be scared of giant zombie dragons. Like, really, it's just such an irrational fear. You're Kamui, dude. You're a dread fighter. Just kill them. Third on the list is Jesse. He's recruited a bit later than the other 2, and he'll be a little underleveled when you get him. But he makes up for that for having really good growth rates, for Gaiden standards. Because of this, if trained, he'll often be the most powerful dread fighter of them all. It just requires you to give him a little bit of love. And honestly, while he does start out underleveled, he's still a fucking swordsman. So because of his base stats, he can still contribute the second you get him. So honestly, he's not even that far behind. Though there really isn't much to say at this point. He does the exact same thing that Saber and Kamui do, he'll do it a little bit better if you use him, and if you don't baby him up, he'll still do fine. Just a good unit of a good class. And last but not least, Dean gives us an actual interesting thing to talk about. He's the 4th potential dread fighter you can get, and he comes at the cost of Sonya, a mage that you have to kill if you want to recruit him, and you have to kill him if you want to recruit her. And it's an interesting conundrum of Dean is by far the worst dread fighter. All of his growth rates are abysmal, and he'll basically just be riding the base stats of dread fighter all the way. Meanwhile, Sonya is undeniably the best mage Celica can get her hands on, because May and Bowie are really bad at Gaiden. So that's the conundrum. Do you get the worst version of the best class, or the best version of the worst class? Actually, not the worst class, because Valbar exists, but for the sake of argument. Now, honestly, Dean is probably still worth taking, but not having reliable ranged magic damage can actually bite you, so Sonya is worth considering. It makes an interesting Aran Samson-esque choice. While Dean is still probably the better option, it's actually pretty tricky. That being said, while it is very close right now, just wait about 25 years. Dean will come back, and he will not be so merciful. After a very solid introduction for Myrmidons in Fire Emblem Gaiden, Fire Emblem 3 goes back to pretending they don't exist. It does add the character Samuel, who is eventually going to be a Myrmidon and Swordsmaster, but he isn't right now. He's just another mercenary. So, not much to talk about in this bit. Moving on to Genealogy of the Holy War, Myrmidons and Swordsmasters have at last reached the distinction that they have in modern games. with Myrmidons promoting directly into the brand new Swordsmaster class, as it will be for the rest of the series, except when it isn't. Because in Fire Emblem 4, they can also promote into the Hero class, which fundamentally isn't any different, as they are still just sword infantry units. Heroes can't use axes yet, that's not until Thracia. But, weirdly, Swordsmasters gain 3 extra skill and speed on promotion, while Heroes make up for it with 3 more magic. Swordsmasters also get Adept, which has a very high activation rate in FE4, so yeah, Heroes just kinda suck in comparison. Generally speaking, Swordsmasters also have a bit of lore, with all of the Myrmidons and Swordsmasters you get in this game having something to do with the Nation of Isaac, created by the Crusader Odd, who was known for his incredible swordplay. So yeah, you got that going for you. Unfortunately, they all have a big problem. Their infantry. And for those of you that know Genealogy of the Holy War, you're probably sick of hearing, if you're not on a horse, you're bad. But it is kind of true. Myrmidons and Swordsmasters will struggle to get to any fight worth fighting unless you wait for them. However, while they are not an efficient class to use, they are an incredibly fun class to use, and I will explain why, starting now. Ira makes the debut as the first Swordsmaster in the franchise, and she is a very fun unit to use. Her base strength and speed is phenomenal, allowing her to cut through any enemy she comes up against, and she has the legendary sword technique Astra. With her skill as a percentage to activate, it will allow her to attack 5 times on 1 strike, which essentially means whatever she's looking at is completely dead. And on top of that, a few chapters after you get her, either Hone or Lex will think that she's really hot, and will give her a brave sword as a romantic token of affection. While giving a hot woman a sword is not the first idea for a romantic gift, you have to thank Lex or Hone for doing so, as it makes Ira even more powerful, as that is now 4 potential strikes to proc Astra. In fact, she could proc Astra on all 4 of them. Basically, she's going to swing that sword at something until it dies. It is so much fun watching those green sparkles go off and watch her rip enemies to shreds. But she does have one problem other than the infantry problem: her survivability. Ira is not very bulky. All that needs to happen is one enemy gets a lucky shot on her, and suddenly she's in critical. So you have to watch out for her, because she will die quickly if you just drop her in front of a bunch of enemies thinking she's going to kill them all. But other than that one problem, she'll kill everything in the game for you, and is one of the better boss killers if you use her. Just keep in mind, she's not invincible. Hone is the second Myrmidon you recruit in Genealogy the Holy War, and the last one of the first generation. And he is also a very strong combat unit. He's bulkier than Ira, allowing him to stick around on the front lines without as much fear, at the cost of being slightly worse at killing things. His promotion is to Hero instead of Swordsmaster, meaning he loses out on some speed and skill, and his sword skill is Luna instead of Astra, which negates enemy defense. Powerful, but might not score kills where Astra would. Still, he's recruited pretty early enough in the game's story, and can still kill things very well. He's not as good at boss killing as she is, but in terms of just the regular goons, he might actually be a little better than her, because he has less worries of dying. So honestly, use them. Hell, use them both. There's nothing stopping you. They can both go out on the front lines together and make mincemeat of everything, while Sigurd goes 10 miles in front of them to the actual objective. Solid showing from Myrmidons in Gen 1. Not the greatest units efficiently speaking, but really fun to use and solid if you let them do what they want to do.
Oh, how awful. Did he at least die painlessly? To shreds, you say?
The second generation's Myrmidons are the twin children of Ira, Larcey and Skahawk, and they are very good at what they do as well. Joining in at the first map of the generation, they have perfect availability, and the maps initially aren't as cruel to them as they are to Ira and Hone, as since you have to go around with Seliph instead of Sigurd, and the game knows that Seliph is unmounted, they actually don't struggle to keep up as much at first. Unless you gave Seliph the movement ring from Gen 1, but that's neither here nor there. They're also basically father-proof. No matter who Ira ends up getting knocked up by, they'll be really powerful, because Ira's really powerful. But people like to go with Lex to give them Paragon on Chapter 1 for them, and better offensive and defensive stats. But Hone also makes a good choice for giving them Luna. It really doesn't matter, they'll be monsters regardless. Once Seliph promotes and gets his mount, and can now ride over to castles to seize them, they'll have a bit of a harder time keeping up, but until that point, they'll be just as good in your army as he is. And honestly, they can still contribute afterwards. It's just going to be a bit harder to do, and you're going to have to go out of your way for them. Just like the Gen 1 Myrmidons. I'll be honest, I have no idea under what context I should be talking about Radalban and Radney. For those that don't know, in Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War, there are replacement units. If Ira dies and can't give birth to children, rather than just have no one show up for Larcey and Skahawk, instead, 2 replacement units show up. A new pair of twins named Rodney and Radalban. But the only way that you would get them is under an Iron Man context. So should I not be thinking about efficiency, because if you're Iron Manning, you're probably not trying to go for efficiency? I don't know. Regardless though, they are still some of the most solid units in Seliph's army. Radney and Radalban still maintain the Myrmidon class's strong speed in combat, though both of them promote into hero instead of Swordsmaster, robbing a little bit of skill and speed. That doesn't really matter too much though, as they'll still perform on the front lines with good damage consistently. Having played FE4 with substitutes myself, I can say that they really aren't as bad as a lot of people say, and Rodney and Radalban are honestly some of the best substitutes in the game. So really, if you want to go for it one day, I'd recommend it. Like, load up Fire Emblem 4, play it normally, kill off every single woman in Chapter 5, and then load up the second generation. Use Radney and Radalban. They're pretty fun to use, they'll get the job done, and they have some cool cutscenes for them. Yeah. I have no idea how to actually analyze these units, I'm gonna be real. And last but not least, we have the one unit in FE4 who might be good enough to be top tier even though he doesn't have a horse. Shannon, the Prince of Isaac. He has all the same failings as Myrmidons and Swordsmasters before him, but he has one really big plus: the Balmung. His legendary weapon increases his stats dramatically, increasing his skill, and therefore chance to proc Astra, by 10, and his speed by a whopping 20. This sword makes Shannon a fucking monster on the battlefield, and your best way to deal with threats pretty much the entire second generation. And he shows up on the second chapter of the second generation. Really early, pre-promoted. He is an unstoppable god on the battlefield, and even when you get more mounted units that should outpace him, there are some threats you want to wait for him to deal with. Ishtar, the White Wings, Ishtar the second time, Aryan, Ishtar the third time. Like, he can deal with everything way more consistently than some of your other units can. And Shannon also serves another very important role. He is immune to whatever bullshit the player did in Gen 1. Fire Emblem fans that have played FE4 a bit know how to min-max all of their pairings, but just an average Joe Schmo playing the game blind for the first time isn't gonna know any of that. They could have gotten some people killed off, or married off some pairings that result in dogshit children, but no matter what of that happens, Shannon will still be Shannon, giving the player a safety blanket that will be there for them no matter what dumb shit they've done, and that is an important role that I think gets underlooked in his design. incredible combat, great usefulness. He is honestly the best Swordsmaster in the game, without question. Myrmidons return in Fire Emblem 5, mostly the same as they were in FE4, promoting into Swordsmasters and sometimes heroes. Swordsmasters once again get Adept innately as a class skill, but heroes now don't get jack shit. They get to use axes, which would be customary for them for the rest of the franchise. Myrmidons in this game are largely the same gameplay-wise as well, being units that are really fun to use, but not that great to use in a strategic sense, because Fire Emblem 5 doesn't really need killing machines. It's a game that's shaped a lot by the support you can offer to your army, be it through staff usage, or by capturing enemies to take valuable items, like staffs. So, a unit that can just kill things like a Swordsmaster isn't as necessary in this game. Not to say that they can't be used, find a good use, and be fun to use, they just, once again, are not ideal. You're gonna notice that's a recurring theme. Going into the Swordsmasters and Myrmidons we get, the first one is Avail, a Swordsmaster you have on the first map of the game, and she's this game's Jagan. She shows up, is ridiculously overpowered, and then falls off. Except instead of falling off as in she doesn't get many more stats, she gets turned to stone. Yeah, one of the main driving forces of the plot of the entire game is that Avail gets turned to stone in the game's 5th chapter, and then you don't rescue her until the penultimate map of the game, so she's just not usable in the entire game. And in the early game, she's honestly overkill. Nothing in the first few maps where you have her necessitates a unit as powerful as her, except maybe the boss is dying to her flame sword, but still, she's nice to have in case something goes horribly wrong, as RNG and Fire Emblem oft will do to you. Once she comes back, she is a little underpowered, but given that she can only be deployed in the final map, and the final map lets you roughly deploy the population of France, yeah, might as well put her on there, because she has a leadership star, which means your units get 3% hit and avoid just because she's there. The only other thing worth talking about is that she actually has a flag in the game's code preventing her from dying before her departure at Chapter 5. So that's kinda cool. She's literally... The second Myrmidon you get is Matcha, a unit whose quality is weird to assess. Matcha is really only useful to you for about 5 chapters, as her stats aren't particularly noteworthy, her skill advantage is good but not enough to really make her great, and she suffers from stiff competition from better units. She's the only Myrmidon that promotes into a hero, by the way, and she has to compete with Osian, who does everything she does but better. But the 4 chapters she's useful for are the most difficult and important chapters in the entire game. So while her contributions are brief, the game is literally unclearable without Matcha because she is your best fighter during the Munster prison escape, often considered the trickiest part of the game. So yeah, I actually kind of like units designed like this. She and her husband Brighton both work like this. Very useful for Munster, and then once you get out, they're both gonna go off to your barracks never to be seen again. But honestly, I am okay with that. It makes the game feel fresh of you constantly having to swap units in and out instead of just power leveling your opening squad to the very end. I think it's a very cool design space that Matcha inhabits. And if you happen to like Matcha, you can still level her up and give her the scrolls to increase her stats, give her some skill scrolls, you can show her favoritism, and she doesn't need too much of it to last for the whole game, it's just there will always be better options than her. Still, I give her a medal for being around during the hard part. Good on ya, Matcha. Good on ya. The third Myrmidon you get is Shiva, and he is also, like everyone else, really fun to use, but wildly unnecessary. His killing prowess is really good. His offensive stats level really nicely. His follow-up critical coefficient is really good. He's going to kill most things dead. His unique shtick is that he has the skill Soul, giving him some level of frontline survivability if it activates, but it's not going to activate consistently enough for him to not be a frail Swordsmaster. So that's a little bit of a letdown, but still, when it does activate when he's hurt, it'll feel really good. It's just those situations are probably going to be too far and few in between. Not too much else to say about him, honestly. He's good at what he does, and if you want to do what he does, you lose nothing by deploying him the whole game. It's just, there are plenty of units that do what he does, but better. Myrmidon comes in, and she's one of those units that, if you look at her objectively, she's really not great. She comes in with 3 base strength about halfway into the game, and needs a lot of babying up to really be useful. And like I said, Swordsmasters are not something that you really need. So yeah, she's not good, but she's really fucking fun to use. She has Luna, she has a personal brave sword that gives her Nile, she can learn Astra, she is an incredible powerhouse if you take the time to grind her up. Is it good to do that? No. But it is very satisfying to watch Myrmidon kill almost anything by herself in the entire back half of the game if you let her. So honestly, she's just one of those units like Ira who's just divisive depending on how you play. If you're an efficient player, you're only ever deploying Myrmidon to talk to her father. If you're a player that doesn't give a shit about turn count, Myrmidon is going to be your MVP every single playthrough of FE5. I think a unit like that is fine. I think she's great. I use her every time I play FE5. She's just a lot of fun. She can do blue sparkles, she can do green sparkles, she can do critical hit flips. It's just great to watch. But seriously, why is her base strength only 3? Wasn't that woman training with her mother the entire time of her childhood? Shouldn't she be a little stronger than that? Nah, anyways. Trode is a weird one. His main niche is that he has the skill Nile, which is a very good skill in this game, but he's just pretty unremarkable. His stats aren't that exceptional, but they can be worked with, and his follow-up critical coefficient is the only one of any of your Swordsmasters, or hero in Matcha's case, to be 1. He doesn't have any crit boost. So he's just kind of a very vanilla unit. There's nothing flashy to him or anything. And given that Swordsmasters are always the kind of class where you use them because you want flash and not necessarily actual consistent efficiency, he kind of fails on that front. If you level him up, he'll still be fine, and he gets support from Pan, who's one of the best units in the game, so that's also fine. But like, he's just so boring. I didn't even recruit him my first time playing FE5, and I often forget about him when talking about FE5. He's just a man. Moving on. It is not a joke when I say that Shanam is one of the top 5 best designed units in this entire franchise. Everything about him is wonderful. As a character, Shanam is a con artist. He pretends to be the great Prince Shannon of Isaac, when in actuality, he's just using Shannon's name to get his dick wet and to get people to give him their valuables. Because of this, he is a dogshit unit. His base stats are abysmal. His follow-up critical coefficient is literally 0. He gets a crit penalty on follow-up attacks that he's often not even fast enough to activate. So, why is he a good unit then? He sounds like absolute garbage. His personal skill is Bargain, because he's a con artist, and it cuts the price in shops by half. He is the only way you can get this effect in Fire Emblem 5, making him really useful for late game shops and the secret shop. He has a very real niche that no other unit in the game has, and that is really funny. He's not good for combat. Like, you can try, but you'll fail. But just because of how his gameplay integrates with who he is, he's my favorite unit in the game. He's someone that can really only exist in Thracia, and I love him for that. Just don't actually try to use him in battle. it's not gonna work. I don't think I'm going to be too controversial in putting Galzus on this list, despite him being a hero. Because, like I said, Myrmidons promote into heroes, and Galzus' whole shtick is that he is of the bloodline of Odd, the sword guy. And Galzus has Astra, the sword skill. If he came in as an unpromoted unit, he'd be a Myrmidon, so he belongs on this list. Fight me. Galzus fulfills the role of a Gateau-type character. He comes in at the end and makes sure the player has a strong helping hand to get them through the end of the game's challenges. You only have him for 2.5 maps, but on those 2.5 maps, he will be decimating everything around him. With great stats, great weapon ranks, great skills, he's just got it all. Nothing much else to say about him, given that he's only around for 2 maps, but he does everything you could possibly want him to. Just, don't be a fucking idiot and overuse him on Chapter 24X, and that way he's fatigued for the final map, and then you don't have a stamina drink, so you can't deploy him on the final map. I'm not gonna say what fucking idiot did that on his first playthrough of Fire Emblem 5. But I'm just saying, don't be that fucking idiot. He knows who he is. After Fire Emblem 4 and 5 kind of standardized what Myrmidons would be, Fire Emblem 6 gives the proper blueprint that will largely be used for the rest of the franchise. Myrmidons are meant to become Swordsmasters, and they are classes that rely on high speed, high skill, and high crit chance to circumvent them often not having good strength. And FE6 really gives them a strong first showing, giving Swordsmasters an innate 30% added on to their critical, making them incredibly deadly in the player's hands and very dangerous as an enemy. This type of Swordsmaster also works very well because of FE6 hard mode, where enemies are actually very threatening, and a Swordsmaster's good combat is actually something the player needs to rely on for a bit. It's not just overkill like it was in Thracia, it's actually something that's needed. And it is so joyfully given by our first Myrmidon in the game, Rutger. He shows up very early, has really good speed and skill, and is doing what a Swordsmaster wants to do. But there are so many things about Rutger that just perfectly fall in his lap. First of all, his promotion item, the Hero Crest, is the first one that the player gets access to, so he has the earliest possible promotion. Second of all, he has the hard mode bonus glitch, where he gets significantly higher stats on hard mode, and he gets stats that are so good, if you promote him immediately at level 10, it's often advised because he'll have already capped his speed and skill at that point. And on top of that, hard mode bosses are really threatening in FE6, and Rutger's your only unit that can really consistently handle them. I don't even want to think about how you deal with Henning without him. He's just incredibly powerful, and he can even be rescue dropped to circumvent the fact that he's an infantry unit and can't get around very well. He is genuinely one of the best units in the game. It is very rare that an S-tier unit in Fire Emblem isn't a paladin or a dancer, but Rutger, he is one of the lucky few. And, for funsies, through usage of FE6's supports, if you get him really buddy-buddy with Clarine and Dick, he can get 103% crit. It's complete overkill, but it's really funny, so you should do that. I do not know how a level 1 infantry-locked sword unit is not the worst unit in a Fire Emblem game, but Fur manages to pull it off, because much like Rutger, things just kind of fall into her lap. While she does start off at a very low level, she gets hard mode bonuses, which will allow her to contribute immediately. She also joins during the Western Isles, an entire flurry of axe enemies, so she can very easily and pretty reliably kill enemies and just start getting her good growth to kick in. And the second Hero Crest, because you definitely used the first one to promote Rutger, shows up only a little bit after she joins. So, what really should be a dogshit unit ends up being a mini Rutger. And Rutger is so goddamn insane then a second him is more than valuable, even if it is a little worse. If you're playing on normal mode, Fur probably isn't worth training up, because the enemies aren't necessarily strong enough to need a Myrmidon, and Fur doesn't get hard mode bonuses, just she's much weaker. But honestly, if you're playing on hard mode, strongly recommend building her up. She will be a huge boon to your army. The final Swordsmaster you get is Carol, who is meant to be another Gateau like Galzus. He shows up a map before the end of the game, he has good stats, and if you need an S-rank sword user, you can deploy him in the final map with a Durandal, and he will do the job just fine. Carol is mainly known for his ridiculous growth rates. Specifically, they are all at or near 200%, which is insane. But he shows up one level away from the level cap, and actually to get him to level up, you need to kill a lot of things, and there's not much time to do that. This is 100% just a funny Easter egg, but honestly, it is a funny Easter egg, and I think it's worth noting. Carol's solid at what he does, and he's got a funny little thing about him. Yeah, a really solid showing by Swordsmasters in FE6. It goes to show that the class can really work if their blinding speed and skill are necessary for the game. I mean, if none of the enemies are fast enough for them to matter, then they're just overkill, and they're not really going to be able to do anything. And, oh, I'm leading into FE7, aren't I? Yeah, FE7 is quite a fall from grace for the class. It's not to say that FE7 isn't hard and a Swordsmaster can't be useful, but its enemies just really aren't fast or threatening enough in a way that you need a Swordsmaster. And because of that, the main way to deal with enemies is relying on enemy phase pressure, giving units hand axes and javelins to deal good damage. And being sword-locked, there is no reliable two-range sword. The player phase of Myrmidons were strong enough that they were necessary in FE6, but FE7's just not the same. And on top of that, Swordsmaster's crit bonus was cut in half, now being only plus 15%, so it's just not a red letter day for them. That being said, if you want to use a Swordsmaster, they'll still do what they want to do, it's just now you're doing it because you want to, not because it's a good idea. Case in point, Guy. He is the unit of all time. He shows up, he comes with a high crit weapon, he'll do some crits, and then when his killing edge breaks, he has nothing. He's just vastly inferior to any other unit you could deploy. If you want a sword unit, just use the Cavaliers. They can also use lances for enemy phase pressure and weapon diversity. The only thing Guy really has going for him is his promotion item, the Hero Crest. There really isn't any good unit that wants it other than Raven, so if you're not using Raven, I mean, you can promote him. He can do something. Yeah, he's just not that good. He's alright in the early game when you have a few axes around you want him to kill, but he's not going to be a long-term investment. Carol shows up again, and he is not as great as he once was. He's a mid-game pre-promote whose stats are fine. Like, if you get Carol and want to deploy him, he is still going to do what he wants, but he has a bigger problem than that. If you get Carol, that means you don't get Harkin. Harkin is a pre-promoted hero who can use swords just like Carol can, but has more consistent damage because he can also use axes very well. So there's never really any reason to get Carol unless you fuck up the really weird recruitment requirements for Harkin. Which is fair. Whether or not you get Carol or Harkin depends on which version of the map you get, and which version depends on whether or not you leveled up your physical or magical units more, but only some physical or magical units, and then once you're there, it depends on how many doors you opened, or how many promoted enemies you killed. Fire Emblem 7's a really weird fucking game.
Look, I've been around the world, okay? Whatever it is, I'll understand. There is nothing about this I understand.
Carla. She's bad. Take all of the problems that Swordsmasters have, put it on a unit that only shows up with 2 chapters left to play in the game, give her shitty base stats so that she can't contribute in those 2 chapters left in the game, and lock her recruitment requirement by promoting Bartray and getting him to level 5 when Bartray isn't good. Oh, and the cherry on top, she can only be recruited on Hector mode, the mode that unlocks after you've already beaten the game. The fuck are they thinking with this woman? I have no idea what went through their heads when creating Carla. She's just bad on every level. Like, even if you like Swordsmasters, she can't even do anything. I just don't get it. I do not understand. If someone in the comments can understand what they were thinking with Carla, please check yourself into a mental institution. Moving on to Fire Emblem 8, the Sacred Stones, Swordsmasters are largely the exact same as they were in FE7. They do fare a little bit better, because in general FE8 is easier, so Swordsmasters can kind of ignore their problems a little easier, but at the same time that just means you don't need a Swordsmaster even more than you did before. Still though, they'll do crits, and they'll look cool, but they didn't really change at all between Fire Emblem 7 and 8. Moving on to unit discussion, Joshua might be a fan-favorite character, but as a unit, he's basically a slightly better Gi, with the exact same problems and the exact same benefits. But, I mean, you could still use Gi if you wanted to, and you can still use Joshua if you wanted to. I am running out of things to say about Swordsmasters here. Joshua has all the same problems and benefits as everyone else I've talked about. Well, at least Joshua's not Marissa, a unit with all problems and no benefits. She shows up significantly later than Joshua, and about the same strength as he was when you got him. And if you train her up, she's only, on par with him. She's not even better. It really feels like she should have been a pre-promoted Swordsmaster, what with her having the moniker of the Crimson Flash, but instead she's just bad. She's like Carla, but slightly better. So, if Carla is the basement, Marissa's on, the 3rd step out of the basement. She's not good. You can stop to train her up because Sacred Stones has a lot of training opportunity, but it's just not worth it. She's not good. I have no idea what they were going for there. She really should have been a higher level of pre-promoted. I just don't get it. What is with Carla and Marissa back to back and being Swordsmaster women who are just awful at their job? Hopefully, Fire Emblem Path of Radiance has a Swordsmaster woman who isn't abysmal. Before we get into that, we do have one more unit, the post-game unlockable Ismare. She's not that good either. The only reason I'm bringing her up, she is the only way in the game to get the Wind Sword. Is the Wind Sword good? No, but a Swordsmaster's the only way you get it. So it's tangentially related. Alright, so it was a rough showing for Swordsmasters in Fire Emblem 7 and 8. But it's the Nintendo GameCube and Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. It's time for a brand new start. Swordsmasters can regain the glory days of FE6 and be an amazing class, right? Oh, what was that? Oh, Path of Radiance is the most mount-dominant game since Genealogy, so an infantry sword class struggles. Oh, the game is very lance-heavy, so swords are the worst weapon type in the game. Oh, enemies in Path of Radiance are really, really bulky, so Swordsmasters have trouble killing them without their critical hit bonus. Oh! Path of Radiance removed the critical hit bonus from Swordsmasters, so they're just not different at all from anything else anymore. Oh! Swordsmasters are dog shit and this is the worst they've ever been in the series. Path of Radiance is just the perfect storm for Swordsmasters to suck. Nothing goes their way here. It is a miserable existence for the class. But the game gives you a whopping 4 of them, so let's see how good they are. Mia is bad. She's terrible. She has decent availability, but she can't kill anything. She dies to everything very easily. The only thing Mia has going for her is that Path of Radiance, through its skill system and bonus experience, is one of the easiest games to make a bad unit good in, but all of the resources you put into Mia, you can just put into literally anyone else. She's not the worst unit in the game, but she's like bottom 3. Maybe bottom 5 if I'm being generous. Do not use Mia, just wait a game. Zahark's a little better, but not really. He comes in with better stats than Mia would have when you get him, and he can contribute kind of, but also not really. His skill Adept is pretty good for a Swordsmaster to have, as it's no longer an innate skill, but yeah, he's still not good. He's not. He's a filler unit, but he's not even good at that. Just put him on the bench. Much like Mia, come back in the next game if you're a Zahark gamer. Stefan would be the most broken unit in Path of Radiance if he was any class other than a Swordsmaster. He's basically a secret recruit who's designed to be almost impossible to find without a guide, but in exchange, be an absolute powerhouse. He comes in with an S-rank weapon that he can immediately wield. He has Astra, which is normally locked behind an occult scroll, and he has insane base stats. But he still suffers from all the problems Swordsmasters do. He's not going to be able to get to the fight very easily. His strengths are really going to be luck reliant to actually kill anything, because enemies are too bulky for him to naturally kill. He's just not that great. Like, he's fun to use, which is more than Mia and Zahark can say, but he's just not worth it. Like, deploy him if you want, and he will do his job somewhat, but even a super secret unlockable character is not enough to save this class in this game. It is just a sad, sad day, and it can't possibly get any more depressing. Why do we live in a world devoid of God's light? Lucia's bad. She's just really bad. God-awful join time, god-awful stats, god-awful growths. Nothing about her is good. She cannot do anything. If you train her up, she will still not do anything. She is not even garbage. She's like the garbage that didn't even make it into the can. The only thing she has that's unique is parity. What does parity do? It's a skill that you can choose to attack an enemy with, and when using it, terrain bonuses, support bonuses, and effective bonuses are removed, and you fight your opponent on skill and skill alone. That doesn't help her. She's a Swordsmaster. She would be the one who needs those bonuses more than anything. I just don't get it. Swordsmasters. We're not that great at FE7 and 8, but if you wanted to use them, you kind of could. Here, they're just abysmal. They're just terrible. This is a horrible, horrible game for the class. But thankfully, Intelligent Systems realized that. Because Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn gave the Swordsmaster class a lot of love. The game design is no longer nearly as hostile to it as it was before, and they gave it its crit bonus back, and even had it scale. Radiant Dawn has 3 tiers of classes due to the length of the game, and how most of the units come in pre-promoted. Myrmidons have a plus 5% crit bonus, Swordsmasters have a plus 10 crit bonus, and True Blades, the new top tier of Swordsmaster, have a 20% crit bonus, and get Astra just for being a True Blade. No secret and one-time use occult scroll needed. On top of that, A lot of the units that returned are now much better at being a true blade than they were before, which is really good. And the 1 to 2 range problem is somewhat solved with the more easily available wind edges. They're not good, but they're around more, so you have a option for 2 range combat. Really, this feels like an I'm sorry letter to the class, because it's just a good day for Swordsmasters. The first one you get, though, is a little weird. Edward is necessary to beat the game, as he's one of your only units during the beginning with the Dawn Brigade, but his growth rates are very, coin flippy. I've heard of people having either the most blessed Edwards or the most dogshit ones. He comes in teetering on the edge of a lot of important doubling and surviving thresholds. If he gets some lucky level ups and can meet them, he'll usually coast on through for the rest of the game. But if you get unlucky once or twice, he'll just start being unable to contribute, and that problem will just further and further compound on itself. Those consistency problems generally mean that Edward is not worth using. But, to his credit, like I said, some Edwards do just end up completely cracked. He gets his own personal sword as well later, if you're playing on the US and PAL versions, and while it's not the greatest, it still helps. Again, Edward can genuinely be a major contributing force to your army. Just understand that for every run of Radiant Dawn that has a good Edward, a run of Radiant Dawn with a shitty Edward is just around the corner. Edward's other problem is that Zahark exists. Zahark shows up in the game's first part as well, and he is a pre-promoted Swordsmaster, with good growths and an immediate contribution to your army. Because he's so strong at base, while the rest of Part 1's units are, not that, he's going to be one of the most consistent units you can get in Radiant Dawn. He'll always be able to contribute amidst a sea of mediocrity. And on top of that, in Part 3, when you get your Part 1 units back and no one is up to snuff, Zahark might be the only one who can really pack a punch. In fact, some people like to give him the game's Holy Crown to forcefully promote him at level 10 instead of 21, sacrificing his late game power just to make him matter more in the Dawn Brigade's Part 3 maps, which honestly is not a bad strategy. At that point, he kind of fulfills a Matcha-esque role of only being really good for a small time, but that small time is where you need him the most. But if you don't want to do that, you can still bring him to the end of the game. He has solid bases, solid growths, and he is a gem among a sea of not gems. Unfortunately, True Blades being a good class cannot save Lucia. Though this time it's not even the fault of the unit itself. If you look at Lucia's base stats and her growth rates, they're really, really good. And on top of that, parity is not nearly as much of a joke as it was in Path of Radiance either. She should be one of your best units. Unfortunately, Radiant Dawn availability exists. Lucia shows up in one map in Part 2, just one chapter, and then vanishes until the end of the game, where she's available for 2 maps in Part 4, and then it's time to choose your endgame team. She just doesn't have enough time to get the level up she needs to catch up to other True Blades, or really just anyone in general. If you want to try to use her, and farm up as much bonus experience and kills for her as you can, she actually will be able to help, and you can bring her into the tower and do well. It's just you need to bend over backwards to use Lucia in this game, which is really sad, because after her abysmal showing in Path of Radiance, this really should have been her moment. But hey, she's not Tormod. Speaking of improvements from Path of Radiance, Mia is absolutely fantastic. Her class is much better now, and her stats are much better to match. She will have a bit of trouble early on killing things, but her really high speed is very good on the highest difficulty, where your other units might struggle, and thanks to bonus experience mechanics, she can patch up her low strength relatively easily. The only problem with Mia is that she's on the Grail Mercenaries, a whole bunch of really good units that all want experience, so it's a bit harder for her to stand out there than Zahark on the Dawn Brigade, but that's more a nitpick than an actual problem. If you want to deploy Mia, she can do amazing things and be one of the best units in your army. I got nothing else to really add. Mia's just good now. Stefan makes his return as a cryptid you find in the middle of the desert, but his gameplay purpose is a little different. He's not meant to be a super secret busted character anymore. Now he fulfills a similar role to Galzus and Carol. He's just a late game pre-promote who, your other units might be better than if they're trained, but if they're dead or untrained, you can just bring Stefan into the final maps, completely untrained, doing nothing to him, and he will contribute. His stats are good, his weapons are good, he's just good. Not the best option, not the worst option, just a good late-game killing option. We really went from Swordsmasters being the worst class in the game to 4 of 5 of them being great. Well, Edward can have consistency problems, so more like 3.5 of them being great. But still, solid improvement. Good news, everyone! Shadow Dragon has added the Swordsmaster class to Arcanea. Great! Unfortunately, it's not very good. Shadow Dragon adds in the weapon triangle to Arcanea, and that is a bad decision. The game was not designed around it, and the remake didn't change enough to make this big change not suck ass. There are lance units everywhere, so Swordsmasters and their only swords are going to always be at a disadvantage at a certain point. There is the added benefit of the Levin sword being buyable and therefore a resource that you can consistently have access to after a point, but it's not very good in the hands of Swordsmasters because it's a magic weapon and none of them will have good magic. The only thing that Swordsmasters as a class have going for them is it's a strategy to class change your sages into Levin sword using Swordsmasters towards the end of the game for the innate speed boost. Which, it's not the best strategy, but it's actually much more efficient than you would think. So, it's got that going for it. Though the poster boy for edgy Myrmidons is actually now a Myrmidon, he isn't very good. Navarre has all the problems innate to the Swordsmaster class, and doesn't have any sauce to get around them. His speed actually isn't even that good at all. He's just coating by on the strength of a Myrmidon and Swordsmaster's innate base speed. He's useful when you immediately get him, because you're still in a bit of an axe town, but you very quickly leave that and enter Lance City. He's just not going to be able to keep up on the higher difficulties. On the lower ones, though, you can probably deploy him. He can probably get the job done. But, yeah, he's not worth it. Rad is... I don't know what the fuck happened to him. In his NES and Super Nintendo iterations, Rad was really underpowered when you got him, but he had really good growth rates. So the idea was if you wanted to train him up, because Agma or Navarre died in an Iron Man, you could do that. In Shadow Dragon, that's just not true. His growth rates absolutely suck now, but he keeps the underpowered base stats that he had. So now, he's just garbage. He's terrible. He doesn't even work as a filler unit. Rad? More like, kill yourself, you god-awful unit. Shadow Dragon added a new Myrmidon to the mix, though, the character Athena, who is weird. She's recruited on the Shadow Dragon Gaiden maps, which, for those of you that don't know, require you to kill off most of your army in order to access them. And, yeah, that's kind of a big opportunity cost. And your reward for it is someone who's really not that much better than Navarre. In fact, I'd argue she's kind of equal to Navarre, except she requires the blood of the innocent. I guess you can reclass her into a Pegasus Knight, but this video ain't about that, so she's got nothing. You just killed Gordon and all of your friends for someone who's okay at that. She's not worth it. At all. I don't know what they were going for there. What is it with Myrmidon women and having baffling design choices? Why is that such a consistent trend? I just don't know how to do it. Swordsmasters in New Mystery of the Emblem are improved, generally speaking. The enemy diversity isn't as mean to them as it was before, and a lot of them got buffs to their stats to make them much better. Though do be warned, the higher difficulties of New Mystery are incredibly player phase focused and reliant on ranged damage because everything in that difficulty can fucking kill you. So Swordsmasters not having good ranged weapons is still a big problem. But on mid to lower difficulties, they can actually contribute really well now. And on higher difficulties, don't take it personally, almost no one is good in New Mystery on higher difficulties. Athena is the first Myrmidon you get in this game, actually, appearing in the prologue depending on player choice, and she is very powerful there. In fact, on the higher difficulties, her great base stats are necessary. But then she leaves, and does not rejoin for quite some time. When you get her back, she'll be very underpowered. But because of her improved growth rates and stats, you can actually use her if you want to train her up. Again, assuming you're not playing on the highest difficulty. Which is better than you could say for her before. And now, she requires no blood of the innocent. So you might be able to get into heaven now. Well, maybe not. You might want to shoot for purgatory. Samuel is bad. He's just not good. His only good stat is his speed, and you need a lot more than just speed in order to exist in New Mystery of the Emblem. I guess if you're on lower difficulties, maybe he can be a decent reclass candidate, or you can just pray to God that you get good level ups, but he's just not worth it. He's not good. Again, fitting because he's an imitation of someone better, but he's just not worth it. Rad comes back, and they actually gave him his good growth rates from his older iterations. He still isn't the best unit in the game or anything, far from it, but if you're playing on mid to lower difficulties, and you're Iron Manning and you need a Myrmidon because someone died, Rad works. He can be trained up, he'll level up nicely, and he'll contribute. Which, honestly, is basically what he did before. So good job, Rad. You are back in the Hall of OK. Navarre comes in, and he's finally damn good. His stats are vastly improved, his class is improved, and though maybe damn good was a bit of an exaggeration, I'm just happy that the series staple Myrm is actually good now. In higher difficulties, he might be a little tricky to use, but you can actually still use him there, and he'll do alright. Nothing much else to say. All you gotta do is give him good stats and a good class, and he'll do well. Funny how that works. Malice comes in, and she's probably the best natural Myrmidon Swordsmaster in the game. She does a fuck ton of damage, with very good offensive bases and growths, though do be warned, she is a glass cannon. Her defense and HP are just flat out not good. But, with enough damage, she can make up for that. Just be careful. This woman will die if she is sneezed on, but as long as you don't sneeze on her, the entire enemy will die. Moving on to Fire Emblem Awakening, Swordsmasters are in an okay place. They don't have their crit bonus again, which is the whole point of the class, but they do have some pretty useful skills to make up for it. Specifically, they can get Vantage, Astra, though in a nerfed state, and Swordfare, which increases their strength by 5 if they're equipped with a sword, which is all they can equip, so yeah. It isn't the greatest showing for the class, but it's not the worst showing either. Swordsmasters are more so just wanted for their skills, than for actually using one, but if you want to actually use one, you can do a lot worse. The only natural Myrmidon in the game is Lon Q, but thankfully, he's a pretty good one. He has great speed and skill, good strength, he'll kill things dead if you need him to, he's just a solid unit. He can be ferried around through means of pair-up of the rescue staff, so he'll have no trouble getting to the battlefield. He's just a good unit. On the highest of difficulties, he might not be too great, though to be fair, on the high difficulties of Awakening, you just low man with the nuclear family and just hope for the best. Still though, solid unit, if you want to use him, he ends up great. Not much else to say. Hey, so I'm recording this after the video is almost completed, because I realize I completely forgot about the entire existence of Owain. Like, I just forgot he was a character who existed. That being said, for the sake of this video, Owain is really fucking good. He's an Awakening Child unit, which is already a good sign for being broken, and he's also one that can get Gale Force, which is the ability to attack again if you kill an enemy. Because of this, Swordsmaster Owain with a Gale Force from his mother is going to absolutely decimate anything you put him in front of. He can be really good. As always, this does kind of rely on what you do going into him, but that's true for all of the children, and that never really stopped them very much. Just a damn solid unit that I cannot believe I forgot. Sayri is the only natural Swordsmaster, and she's okay. She comes in halfway through the game as a pre-promoted unit, and her stats are okay. Her growth rates are okay. She is okay. Her main problem isn't even necessarily her combat ability, it's her supports. Fire Emblem Awakening really likes to have supports with units, and you get a lot of benefits for doing so that Sayri just doesn't have because she only supports with Robin and Tiki. So she just doesn't get the same benefits that Lon Q would get, for example. Still though, Sayri is a solid filler unit, but unfortunately, that's all she is. If you're Iron Manning Awakening and someone went down, slap Sayri in there. She's not going to do as good of a job as them, but she'll still do a job. And sometimes, that's all you need. Moving on to Fire Emblem Fates, Swordsmasters are a bit buffed here. They're now called Samurais into Swordsmasters, due to it being from Hoshido and having their aesthetic, and they have an innate plus 10 crit boost and plus 10 avoid. So honestly, it's not much, but it's a little something to help. And Reaver weapons are a lot more easily to find, so they're not going to suffer from being at a weapon triangle disadvantage as much as they've been in the past. And I know you all are waiting for the big one. We'll get to him. We have two more to cover first. Remember how I said Malice was a Myrmidon glass cannon? Hannah is that, but on crack. She has incredibly great speed, skill, and strength growths. She can absolutely demolish enemies at any point in the game when you train her up, but that woman is made of tissue paper. Now, don't get me wrong. Hoshido in general has a durability problem, with a lot of its units being pretty frail, but Hannah is arguably the frailest of them all. She can barely take any hits. But this can be circumvented through a lot of ways. Usages of the stat tonics, Sakura or Jacob's skills, you can do some good damage mitigation. And if you do that, Hannah can start to kill things pretty well on her own. With pair-up and some timed pair-up guard gauges, she can be a monster on the battlefield with really not that much investment. She's not the greatest unit in the game, we'll get to him in a bit, but she can still do a damn good job from start to end. Also, her personal skill, Fearsome Blow, does 20% of an enemy's maximum health if they are adjacent to her when she kills something. If you have her marry Corrin to get access to Wyvern Rider skills, and get Savage Blow, which does 20% damage of maximum health to enemies within 2 tiles after you initiate an attack, you can make it so that enemies adjacent to Hannah take 40% of their maximum health. Is that good? Not really. Is that funny? Yes, so you should consider it. Hinata's weird. He's weird. He's weird. His stats are geared towards bulk. His offenses are just garbage compared to Hannah growth-wise, though his bases are commendable. And he's in a class that's built around fast damage. His personal skill has him countering damage if he's below half health. But you're a Myrmidon. You don't want to be below half health because that probably means you die in one hit. He's just weird. He's not exactly even bad. He does show up at the golden level of 10, meaning you can immediately promote him, and then he can contribute pretty well before falling off, which is something that some units might not be able to match, but he's weird. He's not that great, especially because you're getting someone else really soon, but yeah, I don't know. He's weird. He's one of the weirdest designed units in the game. He is a bit bulkier than most Hoshiden units, which is actually something, but if you want a bulky Hoshiden unit, he literally shows up with Oboro. Just use her. Alright, here he is. The man, the myth, the legend, Ryoma. You in the audience, if you have never played Fire Emblem Fates, I want you to think of a problem that a Swordsmaster could conceivably have, and I'll tell you if it affects Ryoma. You might be saying the obvious, well, Swordsmasters can only use swords, and they lack 1 to 2 rank. Wrong! Ryoma comes in with his personal weapon, which is, in fact, a 1 to 2 range sword. Oh, well, he's a late game pre-pro mode, so his stats might be bad. Nope! You can literally take Ryoma's base stats into the final chapter of the game, and he can contribute pretty goddamn well. Oh, well, if his base stats are that good, maybe his growth rates are wrong! Ryoma's growth rates are some of the best in the game, on par with Hannah for sheer offensive capabilities. Oh, well then, you might be thinking, his bulk must be bad. How does it feel to be so fucking stupid? Ryoma's base HP and bulk are some of the best in all of Hoshido. He can tank a hit just fine. Now, you might be on your last breath, sweating, almost on the verge of tears. You look at me and you say, but maybe he doesn't join for long enough to contribute? No, wrong again. He shows up at the end of chapter 13. That's not even halfway through the game. Not even close to it if you count the child paralogs. Any conceivable problem Ryoma could have, he just doesn't. He is one of the most broken units in the entire franchise. When I Let's Played Birthright for this channel a few years back, I put him on the bench immediately, because deploying him just makes the game less interesting and fun because he breaks it wide open. He is insane. I do not know why the fuck he is this powerful, but he just is. And he's voiced by Matthew Mercer. That has nothing to do with his unit quality, I just thought you should know. Alright, let's calm down a bit and talk about Hisame. He's not that good. He's a Fates child unit, so even at bare minimum he's good, but he is definitely one of the worst child units in the game, especially because he's trying to compete with Ryoma, and even Hannah can do his job better. Honestly, Hisame can probably contribute more than his father Hinata, but it's really not by much. If you want to use him, he'll do a good job, but he's just not good enough, especially compared to Ryoma, but also compared to other Fates children you could be using instead of him. Moving on to Fire Emblem Echoes, I'm not gonna go into every single Myrmidon again, because they all do largely the same thing. They've had their growths improved in some areas, but Jessie, Saber, and Kamui largely just do the exact same thing, and Dread Fighters as a whole largely do the exact same thing. The only thing of note is that the DLC for Echoes did add in an overclass to Dread Fighter to let them go one step beyond, but like all of those classes, the analysis of that is wildly unnecessary, but really fucking cool. Now, the one I want to talk about is Dean, who has a huge upgrade, not only in the design department, but Dean's growth rates have been drastically improved from the original. And remember before, he was already basically the better choice, but because he was so ass in the growths department, it was actually a bit of a struggle. But Dean is now an even better choice for another reason. In Fire Emblem Gaiden, May and Bowie were two cheeks of the same ass, but now they're much improved. May is downright excellent, and Bowie is downright pretty good. So Sonya being a great magic user is no longer the draw that it once was. So now in Echoes, I can say with confidence, you always want to pick Dean. He is just the better option in every way now. Intelligently teaching your students is a very important part of Fire Emblem Three Houses. So, how well does the Swordsmaster class fare here? Okay, it's weird. The base of Myrmidon is a very good temporary class, giving a great speed bonus, not being too hard for a student to get into, and is just a really good option. That's great! Swordsmaster is an incredible option for its time, getting powerful sword skills, being just a ton of damage and speed. It is a very, very good intermediate class that your students are gonna want to go into if that's the type of unit you want. Though its 5 movement compared to its assassin and grappler brethren is a bit noteworthy. And then, after those two really good options, you would think the ultimate class, Mortal Savant, would be great, but it's dookie. Just dog shit. It loses the crit bonus and sword fare from Swordsmaster, causing its damage to drop dramatically. You have to dedicate time to learning black magic, which had nothing to do with the Swordsmaster class up until this point. It's just not good. And so the problem becomes, if you want to stick with Swordsmaster, you will do enough damage and have solid enough sword combat arts for the entire game. The problem's going to be that 5 move. You're just not going to be able to get to the battlefield very easily. And outside of the Stride Battalion, Three Houses doesn't have the best way to mitigate that. So, what do? Do you just stick with poor movement to be really strong? Or become a worse combat unit to go to Mortal Savant? It's just an unfortunate end to a class line that looked really promising. But Mortal Savants can still kill things, and if you stick in Swordsmaster, you will be even stronger. It's just, Mortal Savant is the worst ultimate class in the game, and it's not by a small margin. In choosing what units to talk about for Three Houses, I'm kind of going to base it off of what you see the students as at their most powerful point. Like, that is their endgame class, so I will treat that as their canon class. And with that, only one student in the entire game is canonically a Swordsmaster, Felix. Felix is one of the strongest non-lord units in the game. Insanely high bases, a personal skill that is incredibly helpful in the early game, which is where you would want help the most, and just solid growth rates. If you keep him as a Swordsmaster, his damage is going to go through the roof, and he will be able to kill almost anything at almost any point in the game. On Maddening mode, he will fall off a little bit, but again, that's just a symptom of high-level difficulties in Fire Emblem. You really cannot go wrong with Swordsmaster Felix. He will do the job you want him to, and he will do it damn well. Though, admittedly, his weak authority is a bit of a problem, because despite it being counterintuitive with his personal skill, you want a good battalion on him, because everyone wants a good battalion, and it can be a little difficult to get him there. But still, that's more of a minor gripe than a genuine flaw, because you can still get him there. Just one of the best students in the game, Lords notwithstanding. And as for the non-faculty, there's only one Swordsmaster as well, and just like Felix, she's one of the best units in the game, Catherine. She is incredibly powerful, and can be recruited really early too, requiring only Byleth to be level 15, and you can lower that requirement with some tea time and support conversations, so you can have Catherine on a roll very easily. she'll do a fuck ton of damage, have really good frontline fighting capabilities, and will just be a damn solid Swordsmaster, though she will have the same movement problems innate to her class. The only flaw with Catherine is if you're going Black Eagles, you cannot recruit her. But, sucks to suck. Alright, we're on the home stretch with the final game, Engage, and Swordsmasters are back to being bad. See, Engage really puts emphasis on the weapon triangle, so any class that can't use more than one weapon is automatically a big problem. The intended balance to this was that those single weapon classes would be the only ones in the game that can use the S-rank weapons. Unfortunately, due to a mechanic called innate proficiency, that doesn't actually happen. So there's never really any reason to use a Swordsmaster instead of something that can use a sword and also something else. It's really unfortunate, but that's just the way that it is. If you want to use them, they do still get their critical hit bonus, and run through can be a pretty effective skill, and honestly it can be pretty funny just to go nothing personal kid after using it every time. So like, you can use them if you want, and that's something, but at no point are they ever the optimal class to pick. The lone saving grace of the Swordsmaster class is that the only representative of it in the game is Kagetsu, and he is the strongest unit in the game. His stats are the main reason. They're just insane, so he can make the Swordsmaster work. If you just leave him as a Swordsmaster and use him the rest of the game, he'll be pretty good. The problem with Kagetsu is that the idea is to reclass him into anything else, and then he'll go from pretty good to breaking the game. But if you want to use a Swordsmaster, you can thank God that the only natural Swordsmaster in the game is Kagetsu, because he is really, really good. You might be wondering why I'm not talking about Lapis, and that's because, once again, heroes and Swordsmasters are intertwined. Lapis is a sword fighter who can promote into either Swordsmaster or hero. And, I don't know, I asked some people, do you think she feels Swordsmaster or hero coded? Her design makes me think she's a hero. Her high speed emphasis in her stat line makes me think Swordsmaster. I don't know, she just feels more like a mercenary hero to me, so I would cover her in a video about them. If you think I should talk about Lapis here, think about it this way. I'm not covering her in a video about making her into a class that fucking sucks. So, take that and run. While the quality of the class is definitely wishy-washy throughout the history of the series, the main thing that Swordsmasters want to do is always fun to do. High crit, cool sword skills, they never really go out of style. Are they ever that good? Rarely. Rutger and Ryoma manage to peek through the looking glass. But even if they aren't the greatest class, they are the hype moments and aura class. Is it a good battle strategy to go into a map and hope to God your Swordsmaster crits things? No. But it is a fun thing to do, and I think that's what Swordsmasters are trying to be. They aren't going to be your paladins or your wyvern lords, but they're just going to be a class that's always there and always ready to open up a can of whoop-ass. And honestly, that's all they need. I like Swordsmasters. I don't often prefer them to heroes, but you know what? Who gives a shit? They take a sword and they go swish swoosh. There is nothing else you need in an RPG but that. I would like to thank you all very much for making it to the end of the video. This was, I think, my longest video I've ever made, and I really hope that it works out well, because this was a lot of work. And seriously, thank you very much for making it to the end if you got here. If you would like to support the channel, as always, please like, comment, subscribe, etc. Consider joining my Discord server, link in the description below, and joining my Patreon. Link is also in the description below, and any help you can give would be greatly appreciated. Let me know what class you want me to cover next. Please one that's not as prolific as Swordsmaster. Maybe. Ask for Ballistician. I just gotta talk about Jake and Beck. Huh? My patrons include the likes of Adebayo Thompson, Alex Aureliga, Amew is not beating the Tails allegations, Andrew Crockett, Bean Juice, Benz Again, Dr. McBackstab, Hell on Heelys, Jespacito 2, Larmachi, Ly17 Bolt, Marth War Criminal, Morgalorgan, Played Arrow, Plaid is pronounced like the pattern, Ranger Man Sam, Shen Lu, Viri the Artist, Yugirl Owen, Grentendo 11, Drew Hack, Fire Emblem Lord, Ginger, Gugu Gaga, Cornelia Milkers 92, Inverse, Lev Maverick, Maple Knight, and Upscale Furry Trash. Thank you all for your continued support, and I will see all of you in the next video. Take care.